Well, you know, I've been teaching science of consciousness and biofeedback and sacred geometry as an introduction to these things for almost 30 years. My background was psychophysiology at university, and I did, well, undergraduate was electrical engineering. I studied biofeedback, and then well, at that time I was trained in measuring emotions electrically with Professor Albert Axe, who was my mentor in biofeedback, and I designed polygraphs. And so I was fascinated by the electrical nature of emotion. And then I was hired right out of university there by IBM as a systems analyst, Detroit O2D, and trained in Poughkeepsie and Chicago with IBM, long lines and that sort of thing. But then I went back to graduate school to study origins of languages and graduate psychophysiology, University of Detroit again. And I did the part that they sort of offered on a scholarship. But then somewhere in the middle of that I met at the graduate school of IBM, Systems Analyst Training School in Chicago, Gurdjieff, one of the teachers of the IBM school. And I ended up in the Gurdjieff Sacred Gymnastics School, Claymont.org in West Virginia, and actually had some bliss experiences, intense, in sacred gymnastic. Actually, I began to have, shortly thereafter, intense kundalini experiences. And bit of a long story, I met and was kind of adopted by Ben Benthoff, who wrote the book on the biomechanics of kundalini. He's talking about pendulum. And I was sort of worked with him for quite a few years, and so the biomechanics became familiar to me. And at that time also I traveled. I was in the pyramids in Egypt, and I went to South America and found the secrets of the Andes, and I sort of did the whole shtick, actually. And and then I became a computer animator and practiced electrical engineering for 12 years with a family business, during which time I taught on electrical engineering topics, actually. And gradually I got back into teaching science and consciousness, which was my passion, and more recently then invented the heart tuner, bliss tuner, biofeedback systems, which are now somewhat global and that sort of thing. So
this practicing of what did you call it again?
The sacred gymnastic of Gurdjieff.
Yeah. Can you tell me something more about that?
The Gurdjieff sacred gymnastic, Aka, Meetings with Remarkable Men, is originally a sequence of postures designed to create ecstasy, bliss. And if you visualize the sort of plasma of the group doing this work, they collectively could trigger a compression event for people who weren't normally having access to bliss because of the discipline of the group work. And this was done with intense discipline, and it was supposedly what Gurdjieff learned from the advanced Sufis and the crossroads of Armenia and this whole thing. I actually was the musician. I played the piano for the Gurdjieff gymnastic at that time in West Virginia, and quite a few experiences with that.
You talk about kundalini experiences. Mm-hmm. This is when the energy goes down the back. Can you describe them a bit more?
Kundalini has been a central feature of my life for almost 30 years. An intense sort of feeling like a red-hot poker is going up your tailbone, and then a hot flame on the top of your head that feels like a red-hot coal on the top of your head that you can't kick out is sort of the classic feeling. But it's tongues of flame, whatever you want to call it. It isn't really much of a mystery anymore. We understand the mechanics pretty well. It's measurable in the microwave. It's measurable in the sacrocranial. It responds to the coherence of the breath and the heart rate variability, and it causes an explosion of growth in the high brain. There's a pumping of the ultraviolet current from the tailbone. goldenmean.info/kundalini. We have some of the best biomechanics of kundalini, and I am grateful that at that time I was adopted when I was having these experiences, which normally would have put me in a hospital diagnosed for schizophrenia, which is the most common diagnosis. I was at that time adopted by, Benthoff, who wrote the book on the biomechanics for medical doctors of kundalini. So instead of being diagnosed, insane, I recognized what was happening biologically and was able to, you control it with nutrition, and you create it's led to my current hypothesis, which I'm rather sure of, that phase conjugate or compressive dielectric field is the mechanism, cause, in a sense, of perception. And that you feel the pressure of that compression event, and you understand its symmetry, and then that is what directs the sorting of waves into phase that's called perception, hence the snake over the head of the Buddha.
Does this give you heightened awareness and heightened inspiration?
What's called heightened awareness is the extension of the plasmic field due to phase conjugate fractality that then sorts the waves into phase over a wider radius, always the implosion preceding the X. And in the kundalini phenomenon itself causes an increase in that electric field. How you harness that varies widely, of course. Stephan Cardino, with the help of the elementals, after his kundalini became very, very clairvoyant. I have a little bit, but I actually became rather clairaudient in my case. And also, I'm able to feel, or I guess you could call it clairkinesthetic sort of thing. And my ability to imagine how a wave feels as it passes through an array is something that has allowed me to develop a model of gravity, actually, and that sort of thing. So the kundalini, by establishing your kinesthetic relationship to the earth, which we now know as the electrical nature of fractality, called grounding, is establishing your phase relationship to all biologic information, which is why we say that, you know, bliss is the final form of education, and kundalini is that, if it's anything. It's difficult because it stresses the bonds of the body, it stresses the mineral to water bonds, there are nutritional issues, but if, you know, it's like anything, bioactive electric fields can eliminate aging when understood correctly, and the Sumerians clearly did.